I was only 8 years old when I learned what it meant to be disposable. The memory is etched into me like a scar that never fades. A gray Saturday morning, my little suitcase by the porch, the air sharp with the smell of rain. My father stood on one side of the driveway, my mother on the other. Each held a child's hand, my brother in Dad's grip, my sister clinging to Mom's skirt. And me? I stood in the middle, waiting for someone to call my name. "Take her," my mother snapped, her eyes flicking toward me. "I can't manage two." My father shook his head. "I already have Michael. He needs me." The way they said it, like I was luggage too heavy to carry, burned into my ears. "She's too much responsibility," my mother muttered, pulling my sister closer. "She'll be fine in care." Care. The word tasted sour, but I didn't yet understand what it meant. At 8, I still believed parents protected you, even when they fought. I still thought love was stronger than convenience. But in that driveway, I learned the truth. I wasn't chosen. Not by my father. Not by my mother. I cried, of course, tugged at my dad's jacket, begged him not to leave me. I remember the way he peeled my fingers off his sleeve like I was sticky gum, muttering, "Don't make this harder than it is." And then he turned his back. My mother didn't even look at me. She was already loading my sister into the car, her face tight with irritation, not grief. When the engine started, I ran. I ran down the driveway barefoot, screaming for them to wait. My brother glanced back once through the rear window, his face pale and confused, before my dad drove away. My mother's car followed. And just like that, the family I thought I belonged to vanished into the distance. The social worker came later that day. She had kind eyes, but no words could stitch up the wound they left. She knelt in front of me, smoothed my tangled hair, and said, "We'll find you a safe place." But her words bounced off the emptiness hollowing inside me, because nothing about this was safe. I was 8 years old, alone, unwanted, left like an old toy nobody cared to keep. That first night in state care, I curled up on a stiff mattress in a strange room filled with other children's whispers. The walls were blank, the air smelled like disinfectant, and the bed creaked every time I shifted. I pressed my face into the pillow and told myself my parents would come back, that this was temporary, that they'd realize their mistake. But as the hours passed and no familiar footsteps came, the hope slowly bled out of me. By morning, I understood. No one was coming. The years that followed blurred into a cycle of foster homes. Some were decent, meals on the table, rules to follow. Others were nightmares of neglect, sometimes worse. But the cruelest part wasn't the cold meals or the unfamiliar beds. It was knowing that somewhere out there, my father was raising my brother. My mother was tucking my sister in at night. They still had a family. They just didn't have me. Even now, decades later, I can still hear my grandmother's voice when she visited once before she passed away. She whispered in my ear, "You deserved better, sweetheart. You were never the problem." And maybe she was right, but at 8 years old, all I knew was this: I wasn't worth fighting for. That was the day I stopped being a child and started being a survivor. What my parents didn't know was that one day, I'd use the pain they gave me to build something they could never touch. People think foster care is some soft landing, like a substitute family just waiting to patch you up. The truth? Foster care is survival. My first placement was in a house with peeling paint and too many kids crammed into too few rooms. Dinner was canned soup and bread, if you got there before the older ones finished it. Clothes were secondhand, smelling faintly of mildew. I learned fast: speak softly, don't complain, and guard what's yours. Even a pillow could be fought over. The younger kids cried at night, calling for mothers who never came. I never cried. Not after that first night. Tears made you weak, and weakness made you a target. So I learned to keep everything inside. Over the years, I bounced between homes. Some foster parents meant well, but were overwhelmed. Others just wanted the monthly check. I remember one woman who locked the fridge after dinner, as if a hungry child reaching for an apple was theft. Another scolded me for reading too much, saying, "Don't get ideas above your station." I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even really a person. I was a number in a system. But in the middle of that grayness, I found one fragile lifeline: art. The first time, it was just doodles with a broken pencil on the back of a homework sheet. But those lines were mine, something no one could take or ration. A kind teacher noticed. She gave me an old sketchbook, half the pages filled, the rest waiting. That sketchbook became my sanctuary. When the house was loud with fights or silent with tension, I'd bury myself in those blank pages. I drew the family I wished for: a father with kind eyes, a mother with open arms, siblings who never left. I drew homes filled with light, places where nobody got left behind. And slowly, art became my language. Other kids picked fights. I picked up my pencil. When adults dismissed me, I drew until I disappeared into another world. When I felt the ache of being unwanted, I poured it onto paper. Each stroke was both a wound and a bandage. Still, the scars deepened. Birthdays passed unnoticed. Holidays were painful reminders that I belonged nowhere. I'd watch kids leave with their foster families for Thanksgiving dinners, while I stayed behind with a sandwich and a TV. At school, I wore secondhand clothes that never quite fit. The other kids teased, calling me charity case. I wanted to scream, to tell them my parents chose not to keep me. But the words never left my mouth. Shame stitched my lips shut. One winter, when I was 12, I landed in a group home with stricter rules. The walls were institutional white, the kind of place where you lined up for meals and every movement was monitored. But there was one blessing: the art room. Dusty paints, old canvases, the smell of turpentine clinging to the air. I spent hours there, painting until my fingers were raw with color. For the first time, I didn't feel like just another abandoned kid. I felt like someone who could create something beautiful from the mess. Even so, I carried the ache like a hidden bruise. Every report card with good grades, I wanted to show my dad. Every ribbon from an art fair, I wanted my mom to clap for me. But they were gone, living other lives, with the children they'd chosen. And me, I was learning to live without them. Looking back, those years in care shaped me more than anything else. They taught me resilience, how to survive when no one fights for you. They taught me independence, how to stand without a net. And most of all, they taught me this: if family could discard me, then I would build a life so strong, so undeniable, that one day they'd have no choice but to see me. And that vision, born in a dingy art room, kept me alive. They left me with nothing, but in that nothing I found my weapon: art. And one day, it would be the very thing that made me more powerful than all of them. By the time I hit my teenage years, the idea of family was like a storybook word, something I'd read about but never lived. I didn't have parents waiting at the dinner table or siblings sharing secrets under the covers. What I had was a clock-in card at my first job and a survival instinct sharper than most adults I knew. At 14, I worked weekends bagging groceries at the local store. At 15, I added babysitting and odd jobs, raking leaves, shoveling snow, anything that put a few dollars in my pocket. The money wasn't much, but it bought me control. A notebook when I wanted to sketch. A secondhand coat that actually fit. A meal that didn't come from the government food program. Every shift taught me something: how to talk to strangers, how to manage cash, how to keep my head down when people looked at me like I didn't belong. But working came at a cost. While other kids went to parties, I counted tips. While they spent summers at the lake, I was stocking shelves. And every time I saw families together, laughing over ice cream or sitting at ball games, I felt a bitter ache in my chest. I told myself I didn't need it, but the truth? I wanted it more than anything. At school, I was the quiet kid with thrift store clothes. Some teachers saw potential. Others saw a problem waiting to happen. When a guidance counselor suggested vocational school instead of college, I smiled politely, then went home and painted until sunrise. Because I knew one thing: I wouldn't be trapped by the low expectations people had for me. By 16, I discovered scholarships. Late nights in the library turned into applications, essays scribbled with determination. Every rejection hurt, but every acceptance letter felt like proof that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the nothing my parents made me believe. Art became my anchor. I entered contests, exhibited in tiny community fairs, sold a sketch or two for pocket change. Each dollar earned from my art felt like a victory against the voices that told me I was worthless. But success didn't erase the scars. I still felt the sting when teachers praised kids whose parents funded expensive art programs. I still clenched my jaw when classmates boasted about family trips abroad. Meanwhile, my trips were between foster homes. My souvenirs were scars no one saw. The hardest part came at 18, aging out of the system. One day you're a ward of the state. The next day you're expected to survive alone. No safety net. No welcome home. Just a box of belongings and a handshake. I moved into a rundown apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky sink. My bed was a mattress on the floor. But you know what? It was mine. Every time I unlocked that door, I reminded myself I wasn't abandoned anymore. I was independent. College was brutal. I balanced classes during the day, work at night, and art whenever my eyes could stay open. My hands were always stained. Ink, charcoal, sometimes food from whatever restaurant I washed dishes at. There were nights I went hungry so I could afford paint supplies. Mornings I fell asleep in lectures because I hadn't slept after a double shift. But every sacrifice whispered the same mantra: keep going. And then, my first break. It was at a weekend street fair. I set up a tiny stand, canvases leaning against wobbly easels. People walked by, most without looking. But then a woman stopped. She studied a painting I'd done of an empty swing set under a stormy sky. How much? She asked. I stammered. $20 felt like asking for the moon. But she paid without hesitation, even slipped me extra, saying, "Your work has soul." I went home that night clutching the bills, tears in my eyes. It wasn't just money. It was validation. Proof that my pain could be transformed into something beautiful, something people wanted. That moment was a seed. From then on, every fair, every tiny gallery, every online listing, I pushed harder. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. Still, every now and then, I thought of them. My father with my brother. My mother with my sister. Did they ever think of me? Did they ever regret leaving me on that porch at 8 years old? I didn't know. But what I did know was this. I had made it this far without them. And one day, when our paths crossed again, I wouldn't be the abandoned child anymore. I'd be the proof that survival isn't just possible. It can be powerful. They left me with nothing, but nothing was enough to start. Because even the smallest seed, when watered with pain and persistence, can grow into something unshakable. There's a saying, success is the best revenge. I didn't fully believe it until the day I unlocked the glass doors to my own art gallery. It started small, just a dusty storefront on the corner of a downtown street, the kind of place most people overlooked. The walls were cracked, the floorboards creaked, and the air smelled faintly of mold. But when I stepped inside, I didn't see what it was. I saw what it could be. I saw a space where my story, and stories like mine, could live in color. David, a fellow artist I met in college, helped me paint the walls. Friends from my part-time jobs donated secondhand furniture. I sold sketches to buy lighting fixtures and bartered paintings for carpentry work. Piece by piece, my gallery came alive. The first exhibition was modest. 20 canvases, each one born out of nights. I thought I'd never make it. People trickled in. A few bought, a few didn't. But what mattered wasn't profit. It was that they saw me. For the first time, I wasn't the abandoned foster kid, the forgotten sibling. I was Elena Vargas, artist, owner, survivor. From there, things snowballed. Local newspapers wrote about me, the foster kid who built a gallery. Community groups invited me to speak. Collectors began calling, and slowly, the gallery's walls filled with not only my art, but the work of other overlooked talents. The girl who had once been told to keep her head down was now standing center stage. And I felt alive. But success wasn't just about the gallery. It was about building a life no one could take away. I bought my first home, a small townhouse with sunlit windows and shelves lined with books and plants. Every corner was mine. No one could lock me out. No one could change the rules overnight. I hosted dinners with friends who became family. People who showed up not out of obligation, but out of love. Birthdays were no longer just dates on a calendar. They were celebrations of survival. Christmas wasn't lonely sandwiches in a group home. It was laughter around a crowded table. For the first time, I understood what family could feel like. But even in the glow of success, shadows lingered. Every time I walked past a family laughing together, I thought of mine. Every time I unlocked my gallery doors, I remembered being locked out as a child. The wound never fully closed, but I had stitched enough to stand tall. Then came the moment I didn't expect. An invitation. A glossy card slid into my mailbox. Vargas Family Reunion, hosted by Marissa. I froze, staring at the embossed lettering. Marissa, my sister, the one my mother chose. I hadn't heard from her in 2 decades. Not a letter, not a call, not even a rumor. And now, suddenly, she wanted me there. At first, I laughed bitterly. Why would I ever go? But then a thought struck me. Maybe this was it. The moment I'd been unknowingly preparing for. Not to beg for acceptance. Not to cry for what I lost. But to show them exactly who I had become without them. David urged caution. You don't owe them anything, he said. Don't go unless it's for you. And that's when I realized it was for me. Not for forgiveness. Not for closure. For power. I wanted to walk into that reunion as living proof that the abandoned child they left behind had risen higher than any of them could imagine. The night before the reunion, I stood in my gallery alone, looking at one of my oldest paintings, the stormy swing set I'd sold for $20 years ago, now returned to me by a collector who believed it belonged in my story. That painting was my life, an empty swing, forgotten in the rain. But now, it hung in a gallery that bore my name. And tomorrow, I would stand in front of the very people who once left me behind and show them that their absence had not broken me. It had built me. They thought leaving me in state care was the end of my story. But all it did was light a fire. And now, decades later, I was ready to stand before them. Not as the child they abandoned, but as the woman they could never destroy. The Vargas Family Reunion was held at a rented country club ballroom. White tablecloths, chandeliers, and a buffet that probably cost more than I'd once made in a year. Walking through those glass doors, I felt like I was stepping into another world. But I wasn't nervous. I wore a sleek navy dress, hair pulled back, and a calm smile fixed on my face. Not fake, calm, because I knew I was no longer the powerless child they'd abandoned. The first to notice me was Marissa. Her jaw dropped, champagne flute halfway to her lips. Elena, she stammered, as though I were a ghost. Surprise, I said smoothly. You didn't think I'd miss the chance to reconnect with family, did you? She blinked rapidly, then plastered on a smile for the guests hovering nearby. Of course not. We're thrilled you're here. Thrilled. That word tasted like lies. Then came my parents. My mother approached first, her hair grayer, her posture more fragile. She touched my arm hesitantly, her voice soft. Elena, look at you. You've grown into such a beautiful woman. I smiled, but my eyes stayed cold. It's been 20 years, Mom. I would hope I've grown. Her hand trembled, dropping to her side. My father followed, broader but older, his once commanding presence dimmed. Elena, he said, his voice hoarse. We didn't know if you'd come. I almost didn't, I admitted. But then I thought, why not see for myself what kind of family leaves an 8-year-old behind? The words hit like glass shattering. My father flinched, my mother's eyes welled with tears. All evening, I endured their attempts. My mother spoke of hard choices. My father muttered about doing what was best at the time. But every excuse was a bandage slapped over a wound that never healed. You each picked a child, I said calmly at one point, my fork tapping against my plate. And you decided I wasn't worth the effort. It wasn't like that, my mother whispered. Then tell me, I asked, my voice steady. What was it like, exactly, when you drove away? Silence. They had no answer. Marissa chimed in, attempting levity. What matters is we're all together now. water under the bridge, right? I turned to her, my smile sharp. Did the water under the bridge keep me warm at night, Marissa? Did it put food in my stomach when foster parents locked the fridge? Did it clap when I got my first scholarship? Her face reddened, her glass trembling. Around us, guests shifted uncomfortably. Some even leaned in, hungry for the drama unfolding. But I didn't care who heard. This wasn't their party anymore.
It was my stage.
Finally, my father sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Elena, what do you want from us? An apology. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms.
No.
I don't want an apology. I want you to understand that I don't need one. That I don't need you. Their eyes widened. Because while you were busy building your picture-perfect families without me, I was building something real.
I own a gallery now.
I have a home, friends who are more like family than blood ever gave me, and a life you couldn't take credit for even if you tried. My voice grew sharper. So no, I don't want your apology. I want you to sit with the fact that I succeeded because you left me behind. The room was silent. Forks paused midair. Even the music seemed to fade. My mother's tears spilled freely now, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt power. My father muttered, "You're cruel." I shook my head.
No, Dad.
Cruel was leaving a child with strangers because you couldn't be bothered to care. Cruel was pretending I didn't exist while you tucked my brother in at night. Cruel was Mom holding my sister's hand while mine was left empty.
What I'm doing now.
This isn't cruelty. This is truth. I stood, lifting my glass. To family, I said, my voice echoing. Not the kind that abandons you, but the kind you build for yourself. I didn't wait for their response. I set the glass down and walked away, leaving them frozen in their seats. That night, when I returned home, I unlocked the door to my townhouse and was greeted by warmth. My friends had decorated the living room for my belated birthday, balloons, a cake, and laughter spilling through the walls. This was family, not bound by blood,
Bound by choice.
by loyalty, by love. I realized then that my revenge wasn't the confrontation, or their stunned faces, or the silence I left behind. My revenge was standing in my truth, living a life they could never claim credit for, never taint, never destroy. I keep one painting in my gallery that isn't for sale. It's of a little girl standing on a porch, suitcase at her feet, rain falling around her. People always ask why she looks so strong, even in her sadness. And I tell them, because that little girl survived. And survival turned her into the woman who owns this gallery. They left me at 8 years old, thinking I'd fade away. But I rose higher than they ever dreamed. And when they came crawling back, I didn't seek revenge through anger. I sought it by living well, by choosing myself, by proving that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying others, it's becoming untouchable.